You know, the thing about the light in the summertime, it's wonderful because it becomes very consistent, very bright, and it's cast all those beautiful shadows everywhere. And we can sort of look along the streets or out in the countryside and find some very interesting motifs where you've got this stark difference between light and darkness. Now, come autumn, what we begin to see is something a bit like pencil sketches along the street of shadows that are going in and out of darkness. Things don't stay the same all of the time because the clouds are going overhead and blocking out the light that is above the clouds, which is really the sun is up there somewhere. But sometimes they're breaking the clouds and we see a splash of light, sometimes sunlight, which brings a little bit of relief into a motive that we're looking at, a composition, and we suddenly see something that we might be able to frame. But what I like to think about as autumn comes is that we're going to have to think more quickly when we're out there with a camera because the light is constantly changing. It's up and down like a yo-yo in contrast to summertime when it's all very bright and the changes in light are sometimes not so easy to perceive. Come the winter time or autumn time, things can look a bit drab. But when we look at other things like textures that come from the rain and water, we look down the street and we can see water running down the street. That's like a little reflecting stream of water. That's something very interesting. People walking along and also casting shadows from possibly from street lights or possibly from the light. You see that their reflection in water. It's an excellent idea for looking at the clouds. They're something that offer a fantastic backdrop in the landscape photography. And very occasionally when you're walking around town, you see a lovely gap between buildings, people walking along the street, and you might see some interesting cloud work in the gap in the building somewhere. Reflection. There's a lot of glass architecture around these days in most cities around the world. Very interesting ideas to look at the buildings, and as the clouds move you might see something come into a lovely sort of framing, a sort of all set up nice and framed with a square building, and I'm talking about skyscraper type buildings where you see some interesting clouds, and in that dark glass on a building, the clouds they can show up in some strange with some strange sort of colour and tone. I like to always think about the street photography in winter. A lot of people have problems with motivation when they love the summertime, but then come the autumn and their motivation seems to drop because it seems so drab out there. But what I like to think is this, and I hope it motivates you too, and that is to think about how there's going to be some wind and it blows people's hair about all over the place. People put on heavy coats and they put on darker clothes, people wear hats, scarves, everything like this, and these things can flap about in the wind. You see people they don't spend so much time waiting on the street, but if they have to, you can see people sort of stamping their feet and shrugging their shoulders and standing like this all the time because the cold wind is coming. These things make great shots, especially if you get a group of people waiting at a traffic light to cross over the street. There's the option of waiting for people who are cold, and they can look quite interesting when they're all huddled up. Another one I always look for, and surprisingly I find it difficult to find, and that is at a traffic light where the people are crossing, is to look out for a traffic light where there's a large puddle in front, and you'll see that people go round it, but there'll always be a brave one who jumps over the puddle. And that can make a fantastic shot, especially if you can include the reflection of them jumping over the puddle and their reflection below, and you get a lovely symmetrical shot of a human being looking like a gazelle in the middle of the city. Things like this are very interesting. There's so much to photograph during autumn. It's just a matter of changing our minds and thinking differently, maybe even changing the lens we've been using for the last 6 months or so. And that way getting a new perspective on things. Anyway, that's just a little bit from me. I just want to get back into doing this channel. I've had a break from it for certain reasons, which, personal reasons, but now I'm getting back into doing the channel, and hopefully next time I do a video, there'll be a nice mixture of new autumn shots mixed up with landscape and cityscape. So all the best, and keep out there regardless of the cold.